Exactly. IGBT7 was quite recently. We started with 2021 with the first launches. We may have actually now 6 different launches during that period, and now it's basically complete. And it's actually important to mention now finally having nice one family name for replacing all these different variations that we have it in the past.
Welcome to the Podcast4Engineers, the podcast you just have to listen to if you're interested in what's going on in the semiconductor market. Today we're talking about IGBT7, and I'm here with our IGBT discretes expert, Blaž. Blaž, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Kelsey, my name is Blaž. I'm the go-to-market product manager for the discrete IGBTs in Infineon.
Thanks for being here. So IGBT has been around for decades now. Can you tell me a little bit about how it's evolved over the years?
Yeah, it's true actually. Infineon started to deal with silicon already in early 80s, so I mean in 72. We just celebrated some years ago 50 years of Infineon Villach, where I actually work on, and we have a big fab that we just modernized recently also and really enabled future growth. And it's really, we are not only 50 years old, but we also built through the 50 years a lot of competence and strong R&D background. And we have really big knowledge that we can now further actually put on the market or basically go with the best technology that we can offer.
Okay, so more than 50 years, that's more than half a century of expertise in IGBT. I assume the technology has advanced over the years, but the last big update I can remember was probably about a decade ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we started actually with this power discrete IGBTs somewhere in 90s, but big, let's say, last update was between 2007 and 2012, where we basically launched all this sort of Trend-Stop 5 technology, Trend-Stop 2 in the 1200 volt, and high-speed 3 IGBT. And as you see, they were all different naming, but everything happened in this around 5 years. It's been 10 years since this big update that we really launched on the market, and we were basically launching a lot and achieving great success in that period. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So IGBT 3, 4, 5, 6, what about 7? What makes it unique?
Exactly. IGBT7 was quite recently. We started with 2021 with the first launches. We may have actually now 6 different launches during that period, and now it's basically complete. And it's actually important to mention now finally having nice one family name for replacing all these different variations that we have it in the past.
What technological advancements have we made with IGBT7? What makes it different from previous generations?
Yeah, that's actually also going to this history that we talked about before. So we started actually with a new 300 millimeter manufacturing in Dresden, but now first time having also IGBT7, these power semiconductors also at this level. And what is important to mention, this 300 millimeter production is actually Infineon world first production capability for these thin wafers.
Okay, 300 millimeter, you said.
Exactly.
Yeah,
in the power semiconductor, because we always need to distinguish. Infineon have, of course, different silicon or semiconductors, but we talk about these power semiconductors, which is higher level of voltage class or power, whatever you want to call them. So that's why they are called power semiconductors.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about IGBT out in the world. What kinds of customers, what kinds of applications use IGBT technology?
IGBT is traditionally used in, you can find it basically in any kind of application. But now, to be more specific now, and talking about IGBT7 family, is a great use for whole energy chain needs basically. And if you look, what does this mean? Talking about generation of electrical energy, storage of electric energy, and then utilization, consumption of the energy. Basically, IGBT7 fill along all this way. For example, talking about IGBT7 on the solar application, on the generation side, or the storage on the, and also on the generation for fuel cell, but then on the storage, perfect fit for energy storage application, and then towards the usage of the energy, which is like example, drive application for industrial automatization, for the home appliance usage, like very become popular nowadays. Heat pumps. We could talk more about heat pumps for heating and cooling our homes, and also in the extent we go towards commercial agricultural vehicles that could also be used with IGBTs.
Okay.
7.
So you mentioned IGBT7 covering the entire energy life cycle from generation to transmission, storage to consumption. A lot of these applications you mentioned are driven by decarbonization.
Exactly.
Right? So I assume efficiency, power density, these are topics that we address with IGBT7?
Exactly. And this is where we are very well positioned now with the silicon solution, in this case IGBT7, because we all read and listen about decarbonization, green energy efficient application, and on the other side also extension towards digitalization and also all these AI needs. Because if you never look in details or you have technical knowledge, or you never put yourself in the technical solution, how much power, how much energy needs to go around it, and how much efficient you need to be around it. And here, Infineon is very well positioned with all products that we have to really be the most efficient and most performance for that need.
Blaž, we were talking earlier about IGBT7, and you mentioned 5 values that we use internally for IGBT7 to explain to our colleagues about it. But I think that could also be relevant for our customers. Maybe you want to go over those 5 values?
Yeah, we come across with these 5 values because we were thinking along. Now we have, as mentioned before, we have maybe 4 different naming generations, and now we put all this to one offering, but then clustering into a subsection. How can we create 5, and we come across 5 values that fit to all or general to IGBT7 family? And what are these? We cluster as a first value is this ease of use, which could go toward direction of, let's say, either replacing the previous generation, or you want to use the same socket where you want to plug now modern, the newest generation. And then also around that ease of use is this controllability tuning that is important. But on the third side, it's also you want to have a nice transient that we really improve and offer now with IGBT7 that we didn't have it before. As a second value, what we actually mention here, or we try to explain, is the so-called power density, because it's the first time ever that Infineon in discrete package put on the market, looking on the 1200 volt device, so current offering at 100 amp, 120 amp, and 140 amp, and on 650 volt up to 150 amp, which is really enabling additional power density, or to have on one space the maximum power. So looking toward the third value that you somehow mentioned that is needed nowadays and everybody is aware about is efficiency. With IGBT7, of course, we really revolutionize and bring additional more efficiency enablement with a newer generation, which makes it's obvious that we go towards that. And we need to save energy. We don't want to waste it less and less because it gets more and more expensive. And this is actually bringing me automatically to the fourth value, which is system cost positioning. And here, system cost position, what we mean with that is that ruling on the price performance offering, we really revolutionize the 10 years gap that we have it, no? And we very well positioned to superior technologies like wide band gap, silicon carbide, or GaN, because we still are able to compete or bring the other value, or we are bring alternative between this older silicon solution now with the silicon IGBTs, really helping and alternating to the superior technology.
So really bridging the gap from
Exactly.
silicon to silicon carbide.
Yeah, or to older silicon, then modern silicon to the superior technologies. Yeah. And fifth value, to not forget also the fifth value, which is quality, robustness. So quality and robustness. What do we mean with that? We went extra mile with the quality, where we first time with IGBT7 now introduce so-called H3TRB robustness. What does this mean? This is sort of humidity robustness, the high voltage. We have actually, and it's clustered and qualified by JEDEC standard. And this is what we didn't have it before with older generation, that we now have it. And it's important also to mention that there are different humidity robustness already exists. One is the H3TRB and one is HTTRB. And now is this high voltage or the high humidity. So basically our devices survive high humidity at a high voltage, which brings us back to the topic of outdoor applications, where solar heat pump and all this application outdoor that are at high humidity and at power semiconductors at a high voltage. And this is where we really offer extra reliability now.
Okay, yeah, so really addressing these new emerging applications.
Exactly.
Not necessarily emerging anymore, but these applications driving
True.
decarbonization. Okay, so you mentioned these 5 values. What does that mean at a system level? How can our customers design different systems now with IGBT7? I think you mentioned paralleling.
Yeah, I mean, if we look on paralleling, I mean, on IGBT7, if we unlock now this current rating with the discrete products, now we have first time basically leveling up with current offering. So more power, the same space, if we want to simplify like this, more efficiency with a, let's say, fair offering. And yeah.
So you get more power with fewer chips then.
Exactly,
I
yes.
guess, which I guess reduces the overall costs for the system.
Yes, I mean, from the size point of view, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what does Infineon's portfolio look like? What do we have a range of offerings in IGBT7 family?
Yes, actually, it's quite a rich offering. We have now, with IGBT7 in discrete package, 46 different product offering, which we cluster it into the 2 voltage classes, 650 volt and 1200 volt, with these 3 different flavors, we call it. So
different flavors. Okay, can you elaborate?
Yeah, we call them like this because they are, classified as H7, so 10 stop 7 is the is a family name, and then we go to H7, S7, and T7.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. And do you have different modules as well?
Yeah, so Infineon Trendstop IGBT7 in discrete package is also offering in the 5 different packages. One of that is very traditionally the oldest, I would say, in that area is standard TU247 package. We also modified when we offer the standard TU247 package, which sort of improve higher creepage clearance distances. And then we have also the, let's say, level up with this current rating offering with the same side, but it's so-called plus package that is basically fully used area of that. And then we have this additional value of the 4-pin. So basically offer the same chip either in 3-pin or 4-pin, where customer can really additionally, if they use 4-pin and tuning of the grounding, really get maximum out of their system.
Okay, so it looks like we have a variety of discrete packages. How does our offering in IGBT7 fit in with the rest of our portfolio?
Yeah, that's a good point, because what we also want to highlight that we Infineon offer always a full system solution, and then here discrete IGBT7 go very along together with the gate driver solution, but also with other Infineon offering like sensor and microcontrollers, and all around that. Actually, Infineon have really a rich product portfolio offering. But also important to mention when we talk about IGBT7, it actually coming from if you go to the roots back of the technology, come from the same very competent R&D that also developed two paths. One is this, what we talked about today, is discrete IGBT7, but other part is also the Infineon module solution that also is offering with IGBT7.
Mm-hmm. So it fits into the entire system approach.
Exactly.
Okay, so if I'm a customer and I'm working with an older version of IGBT, why is now the time to switch?
Now it's time to switch because there is so many opportunity on the market to tackle with it. And here is still silicon will be visible for quite some time. And here now having after Infineon this and being the leader for many years also in the power semiconductor industry, now revolutionizing still and go the level up with the silicon still, and still competing and offering really the best IGBTs still available on the market, and really help and offer alternative to these silicon carbide solutions and wide bandgap solution that will help together with IGBTs basically fulfill this tremendous needs of the power semiconductors that whole world is need. Because we all know that actually we need to help the world to decarbonize and do this on an efficient way.
Mm-hmm. Well, you convinced me. Thank you so much, Blaž, for being here. And thank you all for listening or watching. And please stay tuned to the Podcast for Engineers for more from the semiconductor industry. Thanks.